In today's podcast, I'm going to talk about some of the learning curves that have presented themselves, should we say, from when I started going more towards hand tools up until present day. It's not going to be extensive because there is a lot of stuff that has learning curves with it. But some of the predominant ones for me, I thought I'd just talk about them and go over and kind of, talk about how they became solved, or how I solved them, or how somebody's helped me. So one of the first learning curves that smacked us right in the nose, and it did hit me right in the nose, this had me really stumped, was the number 4. When I was sharpening the number 4, it was working beautifully, and over the course of time, as I carried on to sharpen it and using it, it kind of stopped working, and this had us really scratching my head. So when I was sharpening the blade, and I was taking it to my arm and see if it was, cutting the hairs off my arm, and it was cutting the hairs off my arm. So I was like, as sharp as a razor, yet it's not taking any shavings off my workpiece. What's going on? So I didn't have a clue. Quick internet search, nothing was coming up. So I actually sent Paul Sellers an email, and very kindly Paul Sellers answered my email. I believe it was him, or it may have been a member of his team, but I'm pretty sure it was him. And he very kindly sent us an email back. So does anyone know what the problem was? If you know what the problem was, leave a comment. But for those of you that don't know, so in front of us here, I've got a Japanese canna blade, and I'm holding up to the camera, so you probably should be able to see the nice angle that it's got. I'm not overly sure the angle of this particular blade, but you should be able to see the angle. So the problem with this, or the problem that I had, not with this particular blade, but with one of these blades, a traditional Western style blade that goes into a number 4, is that when I was sharpening it, and at the time I was using the Paul Sellers method, which I kind of do still use a little bit, but I've modified it to my own needs. What I was doing, I was actually pulling the blade too far up, so I was creating a really big belly, and I didn't know, but at the time I was creating a heel, should we say. So again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you should be able to see the angle of this blade. So if you can imagine the angle of this blade, which, let's just say for argument's sake, it is 25 degrees, and then we put a secondary bevel on this, which you wouldn't do on a Japanese blade anyway, but let's just say it was the Western style blade, and we put a secondary bevel on it. Now this secondary bevel was, I don't know, let's just say 35 to 40 degrees. So straight away you can see the problem with that, or at least if you've been woodworking long enough, you'll realize the problem with that. It ain't going to make contact with the workpiece because it's at such an angle, and this was the problem that I had, and obviously didn't realize that I had that problem. It really had me baffled. I was like, how can it cut hairs off my arm, proving that it's razor sharp, yet it won't take a shaving off the workpiece? And that's basically all it was. So, again, just with that steep angle of the secondary bevel, which technically wasn't a secondary bevel because it was all one, I always get these mixed up, is a convex or concave. I think a concave is when it's going in over, so a convex, I think it's convex, is when it's going out over. So the type of cutting edge that I have typically on my Western style is a convex, so basically means it's all one curve, yet it does give it a little bit of strength, and that's pretty much how I've been sharpening for a long time. But there is a caveat to this, in the fact that if you do put too much of a concave on it, you will have the problem that I have, which is basically the convex, the highest point of the convex is going to be making contact with the workpiece, and the convex is nice and smooth and shiny, and it isn't going to cut anything because it's the cutting edge is way away from the workpiece. So that's probably my very first kind of problem with hand tools that I come up against. My next learning curve was with the Japanese Ryoba saw. So again, anyone that follows us on Instagram, YouTube, whatever, they know I've never got one of these out in my hand. This is probably my favourite tool out of everything. I really love these saws. So versatile. You do absolutely everything with one of these, and I do mean everything. Cut circles, the whole shebang. Really, really good saws. However, when I first got one of these saws, I started using it, and obviously it's a lot different compared to a Western saw. So I was like, ooh, yeah, this is a bit of a kind of a shock to my system. I best learn like how to use it type of thing. And as most people do, they hit the internet, start going through the internet or YouTube. And at the time when I was kind of trying to find out how to research all of these, you know, tools, there was very, very little information. And I scoured the internet, I scoured YouTube, and I started going on to forums, which I did actually get some, not bad advice, but I got some, how to put it, I can't even say it was misinformation. It kind of was and it wasn't. So basically what I was told was, whenever you're using a Ryoba saw, you should start at the section of the board that's closest to you and work away from yourself. So obviously Japanese crafts people do this, and I've seen them do this, and I do this myself now. However, I was told that if I was cutting a piece furthest away from myself and coming back towards myself in a cutting motion, that I was doing it wrong. And obviously now I know that's not the case, because again, I've seen Japanese crafts people do that sort of technique as well. So at the time, I didn't have a lot of resources. There wasn't a lot of information on how to use these saws, and I basically had to learn myself how to use one of these saws. So when you look at some of my videos and how I'm using these saws, it's probably a little bit unorthodox compared to a Japanese craftsperson. And one of my biggest learning curves was the fact that I was really, really struggling to track my line. So when I was cutting, a lot of the time I was cutting in an upright position, and when I was using these in an upright position, again, anyone that's used a Ryoba saw, especially a brand new Ryoba saw or a new blade, will know that if you're cutting vertically, your piece is coming up vertically. Let's just say it's in a vise on a tall bench and it's clamped and it's, you know, it's vertically in the air and you're cutting horizontally. This saw will go through that piece of wood, depending on the wood of course, but let's just say a piece of oak or a piece of pine. It will go through that like butter, it really will. So one of the problems when I was doing this, I was in awe, because I was cutting the material so quickly. I was like, whoa, crazy, crazy fast. But what I found was I was always losing my track, you know, and it might have just been a bit of brain fog, or maybe me just the fact that I'm stupid. But it took us a very long time to realise all I had to do was to tilt the saw and I would track my line. And this become pretty evident when I was using this on the Roman workbench, because on the Roman workbench, you do tend to, obviously if I'm kneeling on a Roman workbench, you tend to have like somewhere maybe 45-degree angle, let's just say 45-degree angle for argument's sake. When you do have that sort of angle, obviously you can bend the saw and manipulate the saw, and that is what allows you to track your line. And when that kind of clicked in my head, I was like, oh wow, I was like, wow, so simple, so simple. And what this led us to a little bit later on was I knew I could have the saw at that angle, and that allowed us to manipulate the saw blade to actually bend it. And once I found out I could actually bend it, it kind of clicked in my head, well, I can actually cut circles out with one of these. And again, if you check out some of my older videos, you'll see us cutting out full circles with one of these and curves. Obviously there is limitations to cutting out circles, as I've spoke about a few times, but it is very possible with one of these. But I think that was like a really big learning curve. I was stuck for months and months, and I just couldn't figure out why, you know, I couldn't track my line, but you know, got there in the end. One of my more recent struggles, should we say, is the Japanese plane or kana. And although I can kind of get this working, I can't get it working as well as some of the Japanese crafts people who I see, you know, on YouTube and social media utilising one of these. Basically, they can utilise a Japanese kana, how I can utilise this fella here, which is a number 4. So I have tried and tried and tried, and I've persevered and persevered and persevered. I am getting better though, I am getting better, I must admit. So I think everything about this has been a massive learning curve to me. Yesterday I did actually sharpen the blade, and when I put the blade back in and started to use this, it wasn't working, and I was like, what the bloody hell is wrong with this? And it just clicked into my mind that with all the hot weather and everything, the humidity's going up and whatever else, it's probably the sole. And you know, I should check the sole, and sure enough, it was the sole. So the sole wasn't square, and it's really funny, you know, the logic in your head think, well, yeah, the sole isn't square, but you know, it should still cut, it still should sit, you know, take a shaving. And it was taking a shaving, but it was just really bad and poor, obviously, and that's, you know, that led us to say to myself, what the bloody hell is wrong with this? Because I know that blade is, you know, nice, because I've just sharpened it. And I got a bit of sandpaper out, got me flat edge out. I can't remember what I used now. I think I used a scrap of oak, actually, that was nice and straight. And I went over it with some sandpaper, you know, nice and quick, and you know, within about a minute or two, it was flat enough. Stuck the blade back in, and I was getting beautiful shavings on a piece of oak. So there's definitely a lot of learning curve with one of these. So when I started using one of these, or when I first got one, and I, you know, decided to, you know, set it up and stuff and whatever else, one of the things I'd done was to, when I was flattening the bottom of the sole, when I was flattening it, what I didn't do and what I should have done and what I do now is I'll take a few strokes on the sandpaper and I'll completely turn the thing around, do it again, turn it around and do it again. So basically I'm taking a few strokes on the sandpaper with the heel away from myself, and then I turn it around so that the heel or the back of the plane, I don't actually know if that's the correct terminology, heel. Anyone knows the correct terminology, please leave a comment. So basically, that would be the end where the cutting blade edge is closer to. So when you're doing this, you're getting equal shavings, because you will tend to put more pressure either on your backhand or the hand that's further away from you. One of your hands you will tend to put more pressure on. So obviously if you're turning this round, you don't have to worry about that, because you are equaling things out, shall we say. So I didn't do this when I first started messing around with these, and yeah, it didn't work out too good. So you should always remember to turn them around. Another thing that I struggled with is that when you do get one of these, not always, but some of the time, probably most of the time, you do actually have to get the blade and you have to seat the blade in. So one of the standard things, or one of the standard ways to do this, is to get a pencil and just basically draw a lot of the lines, like a bit of a grid on the back of the blade. You shove it back into the kind of, give it a push down, and then when you take it back out, there should be basically all of the lead or the graphite of the pencil onto the bed of the canner. So when you first start doing it, depending on how good or bad it is, you might have a lot of graphite on the bed, which is good because it's showing you that it's a good mating surface. Or sometimes you might just get a couple of little spots which shows you that it's not a good mating surface and you need to start taking some of the material away. And this was a massive learning curve for me. Even now I still don't like it, and you'll probably be able to see, but I've actually got wood shavings glued into there, and that's one of the fixes, for this sort of thing. And yeah, even now it's something I don't like to do, I struggle with. Yeah, that was like a massive learning curve. I mean, just setting the whole thing up was a massive learning curve. The blade itself, when you are sharpening the blade, I think it's pretty much all Japanese blades. From my knowledge, and again, if I'm wrong, somebody correct us in the comments, but from my understanding, the Japanese don't tend to put a secondary bevel on the majority of their blades, including chisels. And if they do, which again I believe isn't too common, it's only a slight 1 degree sort of secondary bevel, and I think that's just to kind of speed up the sharpening process. So just recently with this, I was very lazy and I was actually putting secondary bevels on, and for anyone that hasn't done it or is going to do it, you'll probably find out that the canners don't like secondary bevels. They really just don't like it. And I found this out and it was just like absolute junk, trying to take shavings with it, and I think it just gets frustrating. In the back of my mind, I think that I knew that I shouldn't be putting a secondary bevel on, but because I'm lazy, I decided to do it. And once you've started with a secondary bevel and you've used it a couple of times, you've sharpened it that way a couple of times, you're kind of stuck with it, unless you want to grind it out and take the secondary bevel off it. So the issue with me with that is that I haven't got no grinding equipment other than me diamond stones, which are behind the camera, or me Japanese water stones. So in the end, because I was getting like really bad results, obviously decided to take the time, which was quite a lot of time. My fingers and my wrists were absolutely killing us. I decided to take this down with a 250 grits water stone and it took us a very long time. I'm glad I've done it. As I said, even the other day when I resharpened this, and obviously I reset the sole, made sure it was flat. I was getting some beautiful shavings. So I think in the future, obviously I'm just going to stay away from the secondary bevels on these and on the chisels. And you know, hopefully I can progress with these sorts of planes. And it would be nice to actually be able to use it as quickly, as proficiently as what I can with a Western style number 4 Bailey's pattern. One of my most recent learning curves is probably a frame saw. So the frame saw that I've got in front of us is one I've made. I was actually messing with the design. It's got a longer handle on this side, which I don't actually like and I don't actually use, and I'm most likely going to cut this off. Although I do want to experiment with a lighter wood and just have a mess around with a lighter saw in general, just to see what I can do with it. So there is actually a few learning curves and whatnot to, you know, kind of get your head round. So I did do a lot of research on this, and again, there's not a great deal of information on these types of saws. That's probably because there's not a great deal of people using these types of saws anymore. So the reason that I do kind of persevere, and I don't persevere as much as I probably should, because if I persevered a little bit more with them, I'd probably be a lot more proficient with them. And to be honest, I'm not, you know, where I would like to be with these on the proficient scale. But one of the learning curves with these is basically using them. You know, it's not the sharpening or anything like that, or even the making of the frame. It's the using them. So when I first started using it, one of the things I would do, I would use my first finger the same way that you would use a Western style saw. So with a Western style saw, you would, you know, basically hold it like that and start cutting, and the first finger provides you with control, balance, you know, so on. Again, anyone that uses Western style saws will know exactly what I'm talking about. You don't use a Western style saw like this, you always have your first finger out, always. So with that knowledge in my head, I started using one of these saws like that, and it was just so much of a struggle. And I can't remember how I've come across it. I think it was somebody commented on one of the videos, and they basically put us on to a German guy, and the German guy was going through a few things. Unfortunately for me, he was speaking in German, and it's not that the fact he was speaking in German, it's the fact that I had to put the subtitles on to kind of understand what he was talking about. But because I struggle with things like that, reading and watching at the same time, I was kind of having to read, and then I'm kind of trying to look up and I'm missing what he's saying. So, you know, that took us umpteen times to kind of get that through my head. So one of the things I learned straight away was kind of that when you are using this style of saw, is that you should be making contact, your wrist roller should be making contact with the handle, and obviously when you're gripping it. So I've spoke about this a few times, and this does give you a lot more control with the saw. So So that was kind of a revelation to me, because when you're using it there, I'm gripping this like crazy, you know, and I can, obviously you guys are watching this, but I can feel a lack of control when I'm doing that. But as soon as I make contact, I can feel there's a lot more control just by making contact with the handle in my wrist. Another massive learning curve, and I'm still haven't got to grips with this yet, is getting a straight cut with this. So I am getting a lot better with the cross grain cuts with these, although same again, I'm not as proficient as I would like to be. And I think one of the issues with this is that when I am using one of these saws, and depending on what I'm making, it might be like a little small piece of furniture or something like that. Now, I know in the back of my mind that I can get a super straight cut with me Ryoba saw, because, you know, and I don't want to sound big-headed here, but I've used it so much, I am pretty good with one of these saws. And with that in the back of my mind, knowing that I can, you know, put this to a piece of wood, and I'm going to get, I'm not saying I'm going to get a 90-degree cut, but I'm going to get pretty damn close to a 90-degree cut with one of these. However, with the old frame saw, I'm not going to get 90 degrees. Sometimes I'll get 90 degrees, sometimes I won't get 90 degrees. So again, with that knowledge in my head, it's kind of, well, why would you want to use one of these? You know, you might have to take a bit more time and, you know, sort that out, whereas I can use one of these, take a couple of passes with the plane, it's going to be nice and straight. And I think that's one of the major problems, is that I should really be putting the Ryoba saw down and really just persevering a little bit more with this, you know, and if I kind of make mistakes, just correct the mistakes, spend a bit more time cleaning the edge up. So one of the reasons that I did start using a frame saw is that I'm able to put Japanese blades in it, and again, anyone that follows us just a little bit will probably know that I'm a massive fan of Japanese saws, because they're just so sharp and the teeth go through wood like nothing. It's absolutely phenomenal. If you've never used one of these, like a Ryoba saw, you're in for a treat when you do kind of use one. So with the fact that I can put the Japanese saw blade in, the thinking behind it, and even still now, if I've got me Ryoba saw, and I think this blade is about 210 millimeters, something like that. So imagine having the proficiency or the cutting, how to put this, basically the speed I can cut with one of these, the ease I can cut with one of these. Now imagine having that 210, now multiply that, you know, it's nearly 3 times, not quite 3, but nearly 3 times. So I get, you know, 3 times the length of the stroke when I'm actually cutting. But obviously it's kind of not the same, because with the Ryoba saw you've got the thickness, or the width rather, you've got the width of the blade, and this does actually help you to, you know, kind of utilize the wood as well, meaning that if I start the saw off at 90 degrees, with the blade being a lot wider than this sort of blade, it does help us to keep the saw at 90 degrees because it's pushing against the 2 edges of the curve. So again, with one of these, I will argue that it has, especially with the Japanese blade, it's got so much potential, and I really need to persevere a lot more with these, but it is a massive learning curve. And one of the biggest learning curves that I do get with one of these is the rip cutting. So I did see an old guy, I think he was an American guy, Can't quite remember his name. Again, if somebody knows, put it in the comments for other people to have a look at him. And basically he was using the rip cuts, and he was basically kind of using a downward motion. So he had the saw itself in a vertical position, and I think he was using a Nicholson bench as it happens. And he was working his just way down, and he was so quick. You know, and the line looked absolutely spot on. So as you do, you have a go, and I can tell you now, my line was not spot on. My line had looked like a child had cut it, you know. So that really frustrates me. And one of the things that annoys us about it was the fact that one of the main reasons I did actually build one of these and start messing around with one of these is that I wanted to be able to cut in the fashion that I've just described, standing up, which basically means that it's going to relieve some, you know, some stress off my back. Again, I've spoke about this lots of times. I've got issues with my back, which I'm not going to speak about today. So that was the whole reason. I thought, if I can basically stand and be cutting like this, it's going to alleviate a lot of pain. So there's quite a number here that might say, well, you know, why not just use a circular saw? And yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be able to have went out and bought myself a Festool track saw. Don't get us wrong, absolutely love it. A great bit of kit, very accurate, you know, and I do use it. But occasionally it's just nice, you know, just to rip a piece by hand. And I used to rip all the time by hand. You know, it wasn't uncommon for me to be ripping 6 foot lengths at a time, or even 8 foot lengths. 1 meter. Very common for me to be doing that. But as I said, you know, with issues with my back, I've had to kind of step away a little bit and, you know, be sensible about things, because I don't want to make things worse. But as I said, sometimes it's just nice just to do it, you know, because I do like to use hand tools. And I think the majority of you guys that are watching probably will agree that you do like to use hand tools. There's something, you know, funnily enough, I was just talking about this with my friend today. There's something about like making your own furniture, or, you know, kind of using tools, using your hands to do something and not going out to buy it, or, you know, there's just something about that. And I think, you know, the majority of you guys watching, and myself included, we do appreciate, like, you know, the hand tool and doing things like that. So as I said, it would just be nice just to be able to master that, or not necessarily master it, but become more proficient at it. And I think that's probably one of the most frustrating ones, possibly. Last one for today is the Japanese water stones. So I have kind of, you know, used them, revisited them a number of times, and I have to admit I'm not sold on them. And, you know, obviously I do struggle with them. So one of the learning curves, kind of what I, you know, kind of encountered, shall we say, is that when you are using the water stones, you kind of have to make sure that they're straight. And if you don't make sure they're straight, the cutting edge that you're sharpening will kind of end up the same as the stone. So, you know, obviously it took us a little bit of time to find the information, most likely on the internet or YouTube, wherever, that you do have to use something like a diamond plated stone, and you should, you know, kind of be going over that to make sure it's nice and straight. Something that I just seen quite recently, there was a Japanese craftsperson, and what he stated is that when you are straightening or using the diamond plates on your stones, you should be doing it regularly. Now, my understanding was that when you start using the water stones, before you use it, you know, kind of wet it, make sure it's been soaked in water. If you're not soaking it in water already, which I do, my water stones actually just stay in this Tupperware with water in it. So I've only got the 2. And when you bring it out, get your diamond plate and straighten it, you know, take it over a few times, and this was my belief. But obviously with the Japanese craftsperson, you know, saying this, obviously I'm watching the subtitles, or trying to watch the subtitles, and I thought to myself, it kind of does make sense in a way. And what I actually found out is that when you're using the water stones, you will, during the use of it, let's just say on the sharpening of this plane blade, you will actually wear them down. So I was actually quite surprised with this, and what I've done, I used it a bit and I wiped all the sludge off it, put it back in the water, I got all the sludge off it, and I got my ruler and put my ruler on it, and lo and behold, you know, after a little bit of use, and I hadn't finished sharpening the blade yet, there was actually starting to become a little bit of a dip, and I thought, wow, you know. And I'm not sure how many people are aware of this. If you are aware of this, put it in the comments, because I wasn't aware of it. So I must admit, like even when I was sharpening this yesterday, it is a little bit more faff on, which I'm not fond of. I must admit, I'm not fond of the water, and I'm not fond of faffing on, like straightening. But I will say, when I was sharpening this, and you know, making sure that, you know, every however many strokes, you know, every maybe few minutes, I was, you know, going back over with the diamond stone and making sure it was nice and flat. I must say it did make a really big difference. So with this new knowledge, shall we say, I think I am maybe gonna, you know, try and get round to using these a little bit more. I do love me diamond, but what I will say is that, or at least what I'm finding out, it might be in my head, I don't know. Again, leave a comment if you've had this experience. But I did actually try sharpening me Japanese chisels, which I've just bought, by the way. These are vintage. You should be able to see them on the camera. I bought 5 of them. I paid like £200-ish, £203 including delivery. And these are vintage from Tokyo. Obviously I didn't ship them from Tokyo. This is from somebody that I follow on Instagram. The little corner, or is it the Cornish little Nomi shop? I think something like that he's called. Anyway, when I bought these, ironically, a little bit too heavy-handed with them, I damaged 3 of them. The edges straight away, which, you know, madness quite a lot. So obviously, as you do, you know, you've got to resharpen them, you know, take the little imperfections out, the little damages, you know, what you've done. So when I was doing it, I naturally grabbed my diamond plates and I started using my diamond plate, and straight away I could just tell this chisel or steel, if you will, just did not like the diamond plates. It did not like it at all. And I was trying to persevere on the diamond plates, and it just didn't feel right. It was very, very weird, because I know in my mind, I know I've sharpened, you know, me Western planes and me Western chisels, and I can sharpen quite quickly. And when I was trying to sharpen this, it did not like it. It did not like it at all. And I have to be honest, even when I'm sharpening with the canna blade, or sharpening the canna blade rather, it doesn't like it. It's very, very weird. I'd be interested to know if anyone else has had that experience. It's like, it was really weird. It just did not like, you know, the diamond plates. That's as weird as it sounds, but that's kind of what I was getting from it. Very weird. So guys, what learning curves have you come across over the years? Some of you guys have been doing this a lot longer than I have and have a lot more experience than I have, and I'd be very interested to hear what you guys have got to say about your learning curves. I think I'm going to wrap it up there for today, guys, so until the next time, I shall see and speak to you guys later.